So we're officially going to start project 2, and we're going to start with a lamp, right? So lamp is the next project. Now, some of you guys kind of maybe went ahead a little bit because you're like, oh, I've got a couple of tools here, I'm going to make a bed. Remember, it's probably a better idea to wait till I've actually posted the videos to start that aspect of that model, just so you don't get attached to whatever you might have done because you wanted to go ahead, right? When we get to the later part of the semester, it'll be a little easier for you guys to go ahead because I've got a lot of those videos already made. I'm still making the videos for kind of the front half of the semester. So keep that in mind, right? And realistically, you get a better idea of exactly what we're looking for, right? Remember, we're not trying to model every little bolt and little detail. More than anything, it's that you're doing the things I'm doing and trying to have a reference picture a lot like mine, right? So in this case, I've got a reference picture, but since this is a fully new scene, right? We're doing project 2 now. I need to create a project, right? So I'm going to go to File, and I'm going to go to Project Window, right? File, Project Window. And we can see right here that it brings us up. These are the folders that's automatically create when we create a project. So I'm going to do New. Although in this case, if I want to, I can kind of just select those really quick. Control-C to copy. That way when I hit New, I can just kind of... Oh, I should have been able to paste that in there, but whatever. DAA. Intro to 3D modeling. Right? We'll call this 240A. And then we'll do underscore because it is the summer, right? Underscore summer 20, underscore your name. In this case, mine is Mike Roberts. Underscore project 2, right? Because that's the project. Remember, you want to use this naming convention, right? And if you're just, maybe you do full DA introduction 3D modeling, that's okay, but really we're just kind of trying to get you to follow naming conventions with underscores, so you have a habit of this, right? Just like you guys don't actually have to turn your projects in. Some of you guys might have noticed that it doesn't let you turn in folders when you submit. You just turn in your scene files and your reference images, right? So in this case, that's the project, and I'm going to hit folder because I do want to save it to not in there. I'm going to save it to desktop. There we go. So I'll select desktop, so there we go, and I hit accept, and it'll create a whole new project. So now I can go file, and instead of project window, because I've already created that project, we want to set it, because that makes it the active one, right? So that way, whenever you go to open something, it'll go right to the project, and any images in particular, like reference images or even textures that we'll see in the later projects, remember, those will actually be in those folders, and Maya will know where to find them, right? So it'll easily load them up and know exactly where to look for them. Particularly if you're moving to different computers, this is really, really useful. So we'll do set project. And then there's project 2. Set. There we go. And of course, what we want to do now is I'm going to go out to my internet here. And this is going to be the lamp I'm going to use. Your lamp should look a lot like this. Now, it's not that easy to find images for the kind of brace inside of here, so that you guys have a little bit of creative freedom on, right? You can make it a lot like the one I do in class. But you should have it look, you should make the lamp base and the lamp shade look like the picture, just like with the bed and the end table, right? That's the whole reason we have reference pictures, is you're trying to make it look like the reference picture, as well as having good edge loops and showing me the concepts and tools that we're going over. So this will work. This kind of lamp will not. Guys, no, right? It should be something like this, this. Technically this is okay, but you notice it's got these little details in there. It's got these little extra legs. So I'd avoid kind of doing those ones also. Go something a little simpler, a little more curvy, cylindrical like these guys, because we're going to rely on revolve a lot for this. So basically, kind of something like these ones right here. In this case, I find this one will work, so I'm just going to save image as. And I'm going to save it right into project, right? So I'm going to go back to desktop, and I'm going to go to project 2, right? So we're in project 2. And you say open the folder, and I'm going to go to source images, right? And that's where I'm going to save this, and we'll just call it lamp. There we go. And now that's already saved directly in the project. So I can close this up. And remember, one of the first things we do when we get into Maya when we're doing a whole new scene, right, is we can go to create free image plane. Create free image plane. And there's my image plane. Now, I'm going to go to Attribute Editor, right? Remember, it's right here, right? We have the buttons form right here, right? There's Attribute Editor, there's Channel Box Layer Editor, which we've started exploring a little bit, right? Control A is the quick key for it, right? So Control A will toggle Attribute Editor off and on, right? Kind of toggles between Channel Box Layer Editor and Attribute Editor. But we want Attribute Editor right here. And you'll notice when we bring that up, usually it's on Image Plane Shape 1, but there are these two little tabs up here, so Image Plane Shape 1. And you see there's an area that's got this little folder, right? Image name with kind of a white grayish folder. We click on that, and that is our browser. And you notice because we've already got the project set, it knows to go right to source images, right? And there's that lamp we saved. If you ever had to move this project to a different computer, and you'd have to actually make sure to find your reference images and bring them with you, right? Maya does not save them inside of Maya. They are their own files. It just finds them and loads them in when you load a Maya scene. And that's the thing about projects is that when you move to a different computer, if you set the project, it knows where to find and load all those things in without you having to redo it all the time. So I'm going to hit open, and there's our reference image, right? Cool. Now in this case, remember, we have to think about the size of our units, right? So we go to Windows, Settings, Preferences, right? And you can turn on different things in your user interface right here, right? Display has some things you can turn off and on and stuff like that if you want to change things around. If you're having a hard time getting your manipulators to work on an older computer, you might want to switch to OpenGL Legacy instead of Core Profile. Manipulators, you can change your manipulator size as well as a few other options for hiding manipulators when you're doing certain things. Remember, Files and Projects has autosave, right? Just like down in the undo section, you have undos. Settings in 2019 has this time frames per second. It looks like in 2020 it doesn't, but if you go down a time slider, you will see it there, right? So I think what they did in 2020 is they just kind of said, well, it's already in time slider, so they got rid of it here and put it in time slider there. By default, it's usually 24 frames a second, so that's actually something we're not even really have to worry about when we do like this little bit of camera animation later on. So don't worry if you don't see it here. But remember, working units we want to change to centimeters. If you were working with somebody in 3D Studio Max and sending stuff to 3D Studio Max, you'd probably want to work Z-up access because that's what 3D Studio does by default, right? But for us, Y default's fine. But we do want to change the working units linear to meter, right? Hit save. There we go. And now we can see that basically each of these grid units is now meter, and that's 3 feet. Now when you think about a lamp is really total height is probably about 1.5, 2 feet. So I'm going to hit R for scale, right? Remember, they're all right here. Move, rotate, scale, but R is your quick key for scale. And I'm just going to left click drag in that center one, right? You hold down your left mouse button and drag. Now this really should probably be about half of a grid unit in size. So I'm scaling it up to be roughly about half, maybe a little bit bigger than half a grid unit size. If you want, you can just double check. There you go. I also like to move it back, right? W for move. I like to grab the blue arrow and move it away from the arrow, right? If I tap spacebar and go out to my other views, right? Remember, A is fit all, right? And that'll work independently for all viewports. You'll notice if I move this forward, you see how it's in front of the grid, so this would actually be in front of whatever object you're modeling. That's why when I left click drag on the blue arrow, I move it backwards. That way it's not in front of things in the front view here. So there we go. And that should be pretty good for that. Now in this case, remember, tapping spacebar is what kind of minimizes the perspective view. And this is actually good because I want to move my cursor over the front view here and tap spacebar. Remember, tapping spacebar minimizes whatever view you're currently maximized, but also whatever viewport your cursor's over when you tap spacebar, it maximizes that, right? And that's important because we want to actually start to draw some spline stuff in here for this today, right? So in this case, I'm going to go File, Save Scene As really quick because I've got it started and everything like that. And you see how it goes automatically to Project 2 Scenes. And I'm just going to actually take this right here and Control-C for copy, Control-V for paste. Now in this case, I'm going to delete all the way up to the Project 2 part and do underscore lamp. And that's the name that we can use for this scene. So there we go. So a nice little kind of recap of how you can go in and do some preference settings and changes things to make it meters, creating free image planes again, loading an image on there, and creating your projects, right? We'll do this for every project, right? And every scene we're going to load reference images for. Now, for this video, what you're going to notice is that we really want to kind of do splines for this, right? So we have a couple of things we're using splines on, right? We're going to use 2 of them actually on this project. One for the core later videos, and for today, the revolve. All right, and we'll actually see bi-rails for one of our first exercises, but I think that exercise is set up for next week, so I'll have videos for that next week. So in this case, we're about ready to go, and I think this image is pretty well lined up, but I might just hit W for move and move it over just so it's centered a little bit better. There we go. And in this case, what we want to do is we want to draw based on this center line, right? Remember, these 2 darker grids are your zeros for these axes. And it's easier to draw these things in one of your orthographic views. Remember, these views that have no perspective or orthographic. So your top, front, side, those are orthographic views. That just means without perspective. And remember, tapping spacebar minimizes, maximizes your viewports. And whatever viewport your cursor's over when you tap spacebar, that's what maximizes. In this case, we want to be in the front view. And all we're really going to do for finishing this video is draw some more curves to make the lamp shade and the lamp base. And this is actually one of the really cool ones. Lofting, I showed you for the bedspread, and it was fine. I'm kind of lofting agnostic. I don't really think it's better than other options, but it's not worse. We're going to see the bi-rail exercise, which I don't like, but I need to show it to you so you at least have some basic experience with it. And that's why I did it as an exercise that we can do in 10 minutes and turn it in for participation points. But revolves are actually pretty cool. Just like the extrude for the chord are actually kind of the cool, in my opinion, the cool spline modeling tools. Remember, spline is just a name for a curve. That's right, it's a synonym for curve. So we go create curve tools, all right? And we go to CV curve tool, right? So create curve tools, CV curve tool. There we go. And remember, it gives us this little kind of crosshair. And particularly since I moved this image back, right? Remember how I moved it back from the 0, this direction? That makes it easier for me to actually draw in front of this. Now, I'm going to go back to create curve tools, curve tool options box, right? Because you'll notice there are actually options like linear versus cubic. What this really is doing is it's saying that, like say a linear, all you need is a start point and an end point. In fact, don't do this, but I'm going to just show it to you really quick. If I turn on linear and I left click, you'll notice that all I need is 2 points to start it up, right? We didn't see that a lot, right? We had to create at least 4. But you'll notice it's angular, right? So that's what a 1 degree curve is going to be. Hit enter to kind of finalize it. We could delete it because I don't really want it, right? And then of course we go back to create curve tool, CV curve tool, and we'll set it back to 3 degree cubic, which is the default. 5 degree, you'd have to create at least like 6 points, right? Usually you're going to go between linear and cubic. And by default, cubic's on, which is going to be fine for what we're going to do in this class. Remember, 3 degree cubic is kind of how many points it needs you to kind of create before it actually really creates the curve. And at 1 degree linear, you just need 2 points to create the curve, but you don't really get curvature for it. It's angular. 3 degree, you get curvature. And that's just it. You have to have a start point and an end point, and at least 2 other points to control curvature, just like that NURBS primitive we created in the last video. The nice thing is this is just for your general knowledge. By default, it's 3 degree cubic, so you don't even have to go to the options box for that, right? You just go to curve tool. There you go. And what we do is we want to draw in some points to kind of create this. So in this case, and you can always find a higher resolution image than this, but I'm going to left click. You don't start from here, right? We're going to do some more modeling with that. So we'll start about here. So I'm going to left click to create a point, left click to create a point. Now if you put points closer to each other on a curve, it works a lot like a bevel, where it gives us kind of a rounded corner, but it's kind of got some sharpness to it. So you always, when you're drawing these curves, if you want some kind of sharper areas, see I don't have to put as many points there, I can put a kind of couple of points in here to keep the shape kind of a little more sharp. So you see how by kind of putting a couple points to each other, it kind of creates a bit of a rounded bevel shape, but it's sharper. Now here we don't need as many because we want more curvature here. So you notice how we don't have to have a million points on this part right here, right? We can kind of keep it a lot simpler. And when we get to here, we might want a couple more to give it a little bit more sharpness. So remember, it's more when you're kind of making it more of a sharper bevel, that you want more points in those corners. But you notice kind of for the bigger, larger curved areas, you don't need as much. In fact, it's better to keep it a little simpler that way. There we go. And then of course we down here, it looks like there's kind of a couple of rings, so there's kind of a bit of a shadow here. So there's probably kind of a ridge like this. So what I can do is, you see how I can kind of put a couple of points there, and then you see how I put a couple of points there, and it gives me a nice kind of sharper edge. And then I'll put a couple of points really close together there, and then a couple there. Now, and you see how it's got this nice kind of rounded, sharper corner. Now here, I don't want to keep drawing this, because remember, that's actually perspective playing a trick on you, right? The base is not rounded. That's the camera angle that's taking this picture. So you don't really draw the whole thing, right? So I'll hit enter, and there we go. So remember, where you want some sharper corners, put a couple of control vertices, like about 3 close to each other. Areas where you want less and you want more rounded shape, less points. Remember, this is its own curve, so if I put my cursor over it and I hold down right mouse button, I can go to control vertex, right? And in control vertex, I can go back in here and reshape stuff, right? I can grab this vertex and hit W for move, and I could easily go back in here and move some of these around to get better shape. So if you still need to make shape adjustments, like right here, I feel like these guys could probably come in a little more to be a little more straight, and I think that one was a little bit sharper than I wanted it to be. You know, so I can come back in here and grab these control vertices to adjust the shape a little bit better. So after the fact, you can always kind of come back in here, you know, hold down right mouse button over the curve, control vertex, and you can still come back in here and adjust these shapes, right? It's like here, I might want this to be a little sharper on top, and this one to be a little sharper down here. Remember, just select your curve, right? Hold down right mouse button, object mode, select it in object mode. Hold down right mouse button over the curve. See how I've got my cursor over the curve? Control vertex. And you could just select the vertices just like normal and use move, rotate, and scale them, W-E-R. And there's our curve. But you see how it's kind of neat because we were able to trace this shape, right? So you can see how for something like a lamp or a chess piece or things like that, wine bottle, beer bottle, glass, vase, revolves can actually be really great. Now you notice we didn't draw the whole thing, and we didn't draw the whole curve. The revolve is going to take care of this for us. We only really needed to kind of trace half of it. And even then I kind of left the top and the bottom open, right? We didn't kind of fully complete these curves. So in this case, I'm going to tap spacebar to go out to my 4 views. And then I'm going to put my cursor over perspective view, tap spacebar. Select that curve again, because we need to actually make a surface out of this. But that was just a curve, right? Create CV curves, or curve tool CV curve. And we just drew a curve in there. And we do bi-rail exercise. I'll talk to you guys a little bit more about these other curve types. But we're just generally use CV curve tools. It's easy to work with. So there we go. There's our curve. Now in this case, what we want to do is we want to go with the curve selected, right, in object mode. So hold down right mouse button, object mode. Left click on it. It's green wireframe indicating it's object. And we go to the surfaces menu, just like we saw with our blanket, right, loft. Now in this case, we're not doing a loft though. We're doing what's called a revolve. Now I'm going to go to the options box for revolve. And you'll notice we can pick an axis to revolve it on. In this case, we want to revolve it so it goes this way. It's basically revolve is going to extrude this curve around in a circle, creating a cylindrical shape. So in this case, we want the y-axis because we want to do it this way. If we were to do it on the z-axis, it would do it this way and create a really weird shape. If we were to do the x-axis, it would revolve this way and create a really weird shape. So technically you could do that, but it's not going to create the shape we want. So by default, the y should be fine. In fact, all these defaults should be fine. You'll notice we have a start sweep angle, which is 0 degrees, and an end sweep angle, which is 360 degrees. 0 to 360 degrees is a full circle. So if you only want to do half of a cylinder, 0 to 180, right? So all of these defaults are fine, except output geometry, right? We want to turn polygons on, right? We want to output polygons. So I'm going to scroll down because when we click on that, there's other options here. Now you notice that this is still set up from the last project we did. If you're continually working in the same Maya, it's actually pretty good about remembering the last settings you use, which is kind of neat. So we want quads, right? Because normally it's triangles by default. We want quads. And normally it's standard fit by default, which honestly creates a bunch of n-gons. We don't want that, so we'll pick general. Now, I did talk about with the loft that there is the per surface, right? Usually you kind of have per surf as the defaults. But in this case in particular, you notice how we put more vertices here and here and here and less there. This is when per span is at its best, right? So you just click on this little pull down menu, per span. Click on this pull down menu, per span. What per span indicates is how many edge loops in the number u and v. This is the number of edge loops it'll create, number u and v. So we usually want those numbers low. If you're going to use per surface, you want those numbers high because it's going to create that many edge loops for the whole surface, right? So if you're doing something really simple, really uniform, per surface will work pretty well. A lot of things that you're going to work on, though, aren't exactly uniform, right? And there'll be more detail in certain areas and less detail in other areas. And per span is much better about doing that because a span is the distance between two control vertices, right? So where we have more control vertices, in areas like this, and down here, it'll put more edge loops. And where we have less control vertices, it'll put less edge loops. So it's really great about being more adaptive, right? Putting more edge loops where there should be more edge loops, putting less where there should be less. And because of that, though, we like numbers that are low. So I'll set those to 2. So quads, right? So just all the defaults here, but we make sure to output polygons. We want it to create quads. And then the general tessellate method gives us U and V directions. And that you can think of as like the number of edge loops up this way, but also the number of edge loops around this way when it creates the revolve. So it's kind of like your horizontal and vertical number of edge loops. And we want per span, right? We want these to be per span because that'll create 2 edge loops, and we want U and V numbers to be low at 2. That'll create 2 edge loops in between each vertex. So when we hit revolve, there we go. And you'll notice a little more edge loops in the areas where there's a little more detail, a little less edge loops where there's less, but the number 2 also makes it nice and rounded so it looks pretty good in low resolution for us right off the bat. Now you will notice that the normal direction is flipped inwards, right? You'll see black here. That's because the normals often with spline modeling are facing inward, right? They're facing inward. So what we do is object mode, make sure it's selected. And remember, we go mesh display reverse. We kind of saw this with our blanket, right? Mesh display reverse. And that'll flip those polygons to face outwards, right? So by default, the normal directions were facing inward, right? Remember how we kind of talked about normal direction in a previous video? That's really just the direction your polygon is facing, right? So now all these polygons are kind of facing outwards. Some of them are facing up this way a little bit. Some are facing this direction, right? These guys are facing that direction. So really normal direction is just, remember, the way it's pointing. And they can point inward. And that's what mesh display reverse does. It kind of flips the polygons outward. Now you see how easy that is to do kind of the base and the lampshade forms for these, right? So before I do the lampshade to finish this video off, just to point this out, remember you have history, right? If you go to Channel Box Layer Editor, you'll notice if I click on this object, there's the revolve. So I can go here and change this around, right? So I click on the very bottom one, and I can change this to 180. And you notice how since there's not a lot of history here, history's not going to screw anything up. You know, usually when you do a lot more modeling and you change earlier history, it's likely going to screw your model up. So history is one of those things that in theory is cool, but in practice usually is just not that cool. So let me set that back to 360. There's our NURBS tessellate, right? So we can kind of go back in here, and if I want it to be less in the U direction, I can, right? I'll keep it default. And then of course we can go to polynormal, which is reverse. That's all of our history. So remember, your object, everything you've done to it's recorded. The most recent things at the top, the first things at the bottom. And you can have a lot of history in here that can slow down the computer. It can cause loading to take longer, but it does give you the ability to go back to any one of those steps and change the properties. Just be aware that usually a lot of the time screws the model up. Also though, particularly when we're doing spline modeling, it does give us the ability to select a curve. And see, I'm making sure my cursor of the curve, hold down right mouse button, control vertex. I can still go in here and change the curve, and it changes the surface, right? Because this is a child of that curve. So keep that in mind, right? So at this point, if you want, you can always just do a quick edit, delete by type history, just to kind of break that connection if you don't need it anymore. I can then just select that curve, hit delete. What I want to do is I want to make the lampshade. So I'm going to tap spacebar to go out to my 4 views. Then I'm going to put my cursor over the front view, tap spacebar. Now if you want, remember 4 and 5, right? Wireframe for 4, 5 for shaded will work in your viewports independent of each other, right? In this case, I just need to draw a simple quick curve for this one. So we'll go create curve tool, CD curve tool. There we go. And then I'll just left click. Remember, you have to draw at least 4 for this one. And I'll probably draw like 5 or 6 just to make sure. But keep them pretty straight. There we go. Hit enter, right? Because that finishes it. And we can tap spacebar to kind of go to our 4 views. Tap spacebar again over this one. And we can go surfaces, revolve, options box. Remember, the defaults are fine. And you'll notice polygons, quads are all good. So I can just hit revolve. And there we go. In this case, right, it's already in object mode. If you hold down right mouse button, you go to object mode, and you can go to mesh display reverse. And there's our lampshade. Now, this lampshade should probably have a little bit of thickness, right? So remember, that's just your extrude tool. If you're in object mode, right, hold down right mouse button, object mode, right, to definitely make sure you're in object mode. And if I extrude in object mode, remember, it brings up this manipulator. And the blue arrow, if you left click drag on that blue arrow, will move those faces out, but you notice how it creates the other geometry inside of there? So you have a thicken tool, it's just hidden inside the extrude tool inside of Maya, right? So remember, extrude in object mode will thicken. Remember how we saw that on our drawer for our end table? We'll see it on some more drawers for our desk. We're going to see thicken a couple more times. It's quite useful. And then of course I can hit Q to kind of go back to regular, selection tool. Remember, Q is your quickie for your selection tool. And there is the start of our lamp.